Did reparations actually get approved? Do black people in America even deserve reparations? How could you distribute reparations if you wanted to? And what is this thing called the consolation prize for slavery? Today we're gonna answer all these questions and more, so let's talk about it. This could be a very good video or a horrible video. Screw it, maximum effort. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to go ahead and subscribe. You owe it to yourself not to miss a video. Trust me. Also, if you have an opinion on anything I discussed today, be sure to leave a comment. I'd love to keep the discussion going. And if you don't say anything, I'm just gonna keep assuming that I'm always right. As you can probably see, I am what American society would call a black man or African American. Well, I'm not actually black. I'm more of a brown or maybe a soft caramel, and I've never been to Africa. I'm probably as much an African American as you are, being that we can all trace our roots back there. Race is not real, but don't get me started, this video isn't even about that. But as a black male, I am afforded certain liberties when it comes to discussing sensitive topics. So who better to offend a bunch of people and get to the truth of some of these issues? Let's start with reparations being approved. This issue pops up sporadically. Let's be honest, whenever a politician wants to excite the Negro vote. And if we are being real, it works. I don't know why, but every time this enters the news cycle, a new wave of excitement rushes across the black community, as if America is going to award reparations to anyone. Do not hold your breath.
Centuries of systemic racism have created a wealth gap in America between black and white Americans. In her latest New York Times piece, Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Nicole Hannah-Jones writes, if true justice and equality are ever to be achieved in the United States, the country must finally take seriously what it owes black Americans.
Let's just answer that first question right now. No, reparations were not approved. I don't know how that rumor started or why there are so many videos, blogs, and just buzz about reparations actually being paid, because no, that ain't happening. Now, do black people deserve reparations? That's a more nuanced question. Deserve is a very loaded term, and it's pretty subjective. Whether you feel black people in America deserve reparations or not, they were promised reparations. Sort of. So it's not insane to expect reparations or expect the government to make good on something they promised you. Actually, it is insane to expect that. I just feel like America doesn't like to discuss things in earnest. They like to pretend that things exist in a vacuum. And for one thing to be true, all other things must be false. But, shocker, two things can be true at the same time.
So you don't believe that racism exists?
I believe that discrimination
How about
exists.
racism? Do you believe that
We're
exists?
one race. How could we have racism? Racism as an idea exists in people's brain, but it's a nonsense idea because we're all the same race. Discrimination is the result of people believing that people are different, and because you have a different skin color, or you may speak differently, or your body shape is different, you're still human. So what point is there to say that there's racism? People have gotten jammed up by this word that came into being in the late 16th century, and we need to unjam our brains. We need to think critically.
So in thinking critically, you're saying no, racism doesn't exist, it's discrimination.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Is it wrong to discriminate?
Well, it's foolish because
Is it wrong?
it depends.
This is a difficult topic to hash out, and I'm asking a lot of the audience because we are touching on some topics that, number one, the media likes to polarize, and the masses want to make it just black and white. But there is a sea of gray, and that's where the truth lives. And we have to remember that the news and whatever politicians are yapping about is not reality. Turn your TV off and go outside. That is your reality. So I'm gonna talk to my audience like we're friends, because we are, right? And I will get a little bit off topic, but I feel that clarification is needed. At the end of the day, we are all people, and we function off relationships. And those relationships that we have with specific groups or people will always be more important than the bigger relationships that the groups we identify with have with other groups. Does that make sense? Like, what you know of your friend group is more important than what the news is telling you about the bigger group groups they identify with. For example, I have a very diverse friend group. I'm just out here collecting ethnicities, okay? And the longer you stay watching this channel, the more you will see that I say some pretty wild stuff. I'm all for a good joke, and sometimes pointing out the differences and stereotypes between ethnicities can be hilarious. The idea that everyone is the same, or you can't poke fun at people because they are some protected class, or there isn't humor in their specific situation is stupid. The difference is that when you do it with friends, it's seen as humor or not to be mean-spirited or vile, and it doesn't really represent your feelings toward that entire ethnicity. For example, and this is when if I was more important, I'd get canceled, but I'm not, so I'm not worried about it. Again, I don't believe in races, but racial stereotypes are hilarious, and I have some go-tos. Like my white friends, I may offer them sauerkraut when they come over. I might ask my Asian friends if they'd like a bowl of fried rice. I've got some Asian and black friends, and you can get a double whammy by offering them fried rice and some fried chicken and maybe some watermelon or an egg roll. The jokes are endless. So I say all that to say, when discussing these topics, you have to remember, most people know all sorts of people personally. And if you lead with that, remembering that familiarity you have with other ethnicities, you can be more honest when talking. So, deserving reparations. Honestly,
but when people ask me, what can I as an individual do? One of the things I suggested, besides being educated, besides participating with other African American and Latino and other brothers and sisters in social movement, is to do something called an individual repair of inequality. And if they feel inclined to do so, this is for people who are so inclined to seek out a way to compensate individually for what they think is a systemic injustice.
Well, thanks for clearing that up. If the U.S. was offering to pay all white people reparations, most white people would be like, sure. I mean, who was going to turn down free money?
Because every penny you get from reparations is going to go to the Chinaman, to the Arab, to the Jew. Yep. It's going to Mercedes. It's going to Nike. Any reparations package that does not give us exclusive control of our music, as far as I'm concerned, is a loss.
This is exactly why aliens don't visit. So is it deserved? That's the wrong word. It's kind of owed because it was kind of promised, but it's never gonna happen, and that leads me to my third question. How could you distribute reparations? This is really a futile exercise because, again, it ain't happening. But I'm gonna go through this because people against it get all angry and people for it get all hopeful, and if they were honest, they wouldn't care because the application would be impossible. For starters, since we are living in this world of made-up things like race, how would you even define what black is? How do you decide who is black enough to get reparations? My wife is Puerto Rican, so my kids are El Salvadorian, I don't know. Are they black enough? My brother had his ancestry done. He's now on some government watch list, but apparently he's like 10% Scottish. And there's some Cornwall and England in there. Is that a disqualifier? I mean, how black is black enough? Also, what is too black? Let's say you're black, but like right out of Africa black, like second generation Kenya or something. Are you really gonna tell them that they're too black, too African American to get reparations? Or would black Americans bear the burden of tracing their lineage back to one of the original 4 million freed slaves? That would be a nightmare. But if we move past defining who's black and who qualifies, how would you even distribute it? The original promise was the whole 40 acres and a mule. That was in 1865, and it didn't get that far. Originally, there were 4 million freed slaves. 400,000 acres were supposed to be divided between them and 40-acre plots to go to each family. But that was quickly overturned by Andrew Johnson, who was like,
"Oh, you almost had it. You gotta be quicker than that."
But it's estimated that the value of that today would be more than $640 billion. And that sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. So maybe it's a lot more possible than I thought. Follow me. If you were given $640 billion to 4 million people, each one would get $160,000. It's a good chunk of money, but not life-changing. But do you realize how big that pool has to be now, several generations later? Let's look at like 2 generations here. Let's say my mom represents one of those 4 million slaves. She has 6 kids. Yes, I come from a big family. My sister has no kids. My older brother has, well, we'll say 6 kids. I have 3 kids. My other brother has 2 kids. My other brother has 3 kids. And my youngest brother has 1 kid. That would mean in just 2 generations, that one slave is now 22 people. And this is much more than just 2 generations away. This was 160 years. But just going off 2 generations, you take 4 million multiply by 22, you get 88 million people. And now 640 billion divided amongst 88 million people is $7,272.72. Wait, did I just prove how easy it would be to actually give out reparations? And also, how much it would not matter. This whole video is pointless. I mean, in reality, it's way more people. It would probably be like 63 cents a person. Keep your reparations. Now, I'm aware that the black population in America is something like 40 million people or around that, but I promise you, there are a lot of non-black folk walking around that could trace their roots back to the original freed slaves. So yeah, you might as well give reparations now. We can all like share a meal at Popeyes or churches or something. But this all brings me to my last topic. What did slavery in America actually get black Americans? You see, first there was slavery, then decades of segregation and Jim Crow, which the remnants of still exist today. It's steadily getting better. And no, racism is nowhere near what it used to be. But of course, we have improvements to make. And then there are things like EOE and DEI, etc. And a lot of people complain that this is some sort of reverse racism. Trust me, it's not as beneficial as you think. But that's not what I'm talking about. There's this thing that the world seems to ignore. And if there was any other ethnicity that did it or any other group, the world would flip out. But we can do this all day and no one is gonna say a word. Even the most racist people won't call it out. What I'm talking about is the ability of black actors, comedians, basically anyone that is black to say super racist things and no one bats an eye.
Look at all these crackers.
This year's nominees for the funniest cracker of the year are...
Every day in the police department, I kicked those crackers' ass, man. I was unbelievable in the police department when one of the blacks in law enforcement.
And I'm calling this the consolation prize for slavery. It's like the world has agreed that slavery sucked. We're sorry. We will ban the N-word everywhere because that belongs to you. And you can also say things like honky and cracker, whatever racial epithet you'd like. And we are just gonna shut up. I've always found this so odd. And I wonder, did I miss a memo? Like, did I not get the card that goes with these racist superpowers? And don't even try to make this one of those videos where it's like white people aren't racist, actually black people are, because it's not. Everyone has the capacity to be racist. But what I'm talking about is in mainstream media, there are plenty of shows with black actors saying things that if their white counterparts said, they would be canceled, fired, and jumped in the alley. And I'm not bringing this up to make some sort of rallying cry or say how much we need to change this. I just think it's weird that collectively the world has agreed to ignore it. I will say that anecdotally, amongst the people that I know, black people are way more comfortable discussing race than most other ethnicities. And a lot of times, this seems like the type of banter that happens between friends, but it's still weird. And I wish that we could all get to a place where the idea of talking about things like that wasn't so controversial and people leaned into difficult conversations. I don't know how else we as a society will find common ground. I mean, as I've said before, stereotypes can be plenty hilarious, but it takes a higher level of intelligence, I guess, to acknowledge that the assumption that all people that look a certain way, act a certain way is stupid. Denzel Washington said something once on an interview, and it was very true and telling, and fought against the race and color narrative. And it brought up something that we don't talk about much, which is culture. There is an American culture, just like there's a Japanese culture or a Puerto Rican culture or a Cuban culture. And with that American culture, there are many, many, many subcultures because this is such a blended and diverse territory. Like, there are things we can all understand as Americans, but if you're Italian American, there are things that you do that harken back to Italy, the same as if you were Thai or any other ethnicity. So you will have that American culture, but you're also part of that subculture that is tied back to where your family comes from.
So why did he need a black director? Could a white director not have?
It's not color, it's culture.
Explain the difference, because I think we're
Steven
in a space
Spielberg
right now.
did Schindler's List.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Scorsese did Goodfellas, right? Steven Spielberg could direct Goodfellas. Martin Scorsese probably could have done a good job with Schindler's List, but they're cultural differences. You know, I know, you know, we all know what it is when a hot comb hits your hair on a Sunday morning, what it smells like. That's a cultural difference, not just a color difference.
Right.
So it's the culture.
And that covers the consolation prize for slavery. Like I said, let's keep the discussion going in the comments. What are your thoughts on reparations, especially now that they are so cheap? And how do we go about handling inclusion and diversity and seeing ourselves as Americans first, but still honoring the cultures and customs that we came from and learning to celebrate them instead of pretending that they don't exist? I'm gonna hurry up and post this and then run over to the comments and see what I can get popping.